Hello everyone. Nice to see you guys here today. So my name's Alvin. I'm from OneSecure, and I am the Customer Success Manager for OneSecure, which means that I'm the front-facing gateway for them, basically. So customers, whatever issues they might have, technical or otherwise, they bring it to me, and I translate it back to them for operations and to get the improvement process going with them. So a little bit about OneSecure. And so I'll start it off with our introductions. So we are a MSSP, a Managed Security Service Provider, and we've been active since 2018, and we are also one of the fastest growing in the region at the moment. We operate two SOCs within the region, one in KL, which is our primary SOC, as well as our secondary SOC in Singapore. And we just opened an office in Indonesia as well. And our tertiary SOC will be there as we set it up. So we are actually a major security provider for many of the telcos in the region. So from StarHub, M1, and Singtel in Singapore, in Indonesia, Telekom Asia, SPTel as well. And with that, as our business grows, we are actually handling over 1 terabyte of data coming into our SIM each time. And of this 1 terabyte, more than 800 devices are coming in both devices and assets are coming into our SIM, where our SOC will do the monitoring, alerting, investigation, as well as threat hunting. And because of our presence in a lot of the telcos, we are altogether monitoring over 1,000 enterprises within our networks. So I'll go real quick the services that we offer in OneSecure. Our primary is both a SIM and a SOC as a service for enterprises or for SMEs as well, especially those that already have IT department. So we are an extension of the IT department basically, where we do the monitoring, we do the alerting so that the IT department can make the relevant changes or make the necessary actions that comes about. We also do a lot of DDoS mitigation for a lot of the telcos. So chances are that if you use any of the online services from any of the major providers in Singapore, we are already protecting those networks to minimize disruptions and outages. And to complement that, we also do some web app security monitoring, which is we provide WAFs. We also provide web defacement monitoring to make sure that if your website does get defaced, we will alert you straight away. And finally, we also branched out into endpoint security management, where we will do mostly towards compliance and make sure that your security policies are in line with the end users and your endpoints. Okay, so for us, the reason why we have been successful as an MSSP is because we have built it upon a foundation of maximizing the visibility into your ecosystem. So we do log collection, and from this data that we aggregate, we have a very clear idea of how we can advise people to do preventive maintenance. We also gives us a very clear line and indication for continuous monitoring, our alerting, as well as security audits for, let's say, some of the more popular guidelines, such as the NIST. So with that, I'll go into the main topic that I wish to bring about today. So since I think everybody knows COVID has disrupted a lot of the world today, supply chains, logistics, IT companies, so on and so forth. With that, based on research from PurpleSec, cybercrime has actually gone up more than 6-fold since COVID started in 2020. Of all the respondents that were interviewed during this period of time, More than 87% of them said that they have been targeted by phishing attacks, whether spear phishing or just a broad net cast by threat actors. 95% of security breaches so far have been the results of human errors. Human errors can be clicking on a phishing link, can be misconfigurations, can be as well as somebody just leaving their password out in the open by accident. And of all the respondents for the survey, only 16% of them say that they are well prepared to deal with the cyber risk that comes about from this new rise of cyber threat and cyber terrorism. So in adapting to the new IT environment, because of COVID, a lot of us are in what we call the new norm for the hybrid workforce, where we have our workforce separated between people working from home, remote workers, as well as people who use more and more cloud services and software as a service. Research by Morse Insights states that as we go from pandemic into the endemic or the new norm, 80% of companies will start to offer more flexible workspaces. And of this, 70% of employees surveyed said that they will take advantage of this flexibility, because I believe there are a lot of people who think that going back into the old norm proves to be more less productive, let's put it that way. So with that said, organizations must adapt and protect both their people and their assets as we transit over to this new norm. So it used to be that the old security perimeter, you had your network perimeter, which is your firewalls, your IDS, your IPS, and you assign your very high value assets into this network perimeter. From there, outside your network perimeter, you had your managed devices, your company-issued laptops, and those that had mobile device management softwares installed onto them, as well as approved cloud services that might come about based on the use cases of your business. And all this formed together what was known as the old security perimeter. You had your identity perimeter, as well as your network perimeter. You knew what was going on within your company's infrastructure. And persistent threats that always came in, generally, they would go through your identity perimeter and go into your network perimeter, which is their main goal, be it ransomware, malware, data extortion, and things like that. But with COVID came hybrid workforce. With hybrid workforce, we started to see more and more unmanaged devices coming in. And this can be a combination of multiple things. It could be you issued a company laptop to one of your employees, and what they do is because they want to multitask at home. They started installing additional softwares. They started logging into company credentials on their tablets, on their personal laptops, have a shared computer with their kids maybe, because at one point of time it was all about studying at home and remote studying. And this led to what we call known as shadow IT, where we lost some control of what we knew within the network. Things that were secured once before can be now considered an unknown variable. And this greatly increased the attack surface overall for a lot of organizations, be it enterprises, be it SMEs, because with unmanaged devices, you will not know what they have installed inside. It could be a pirated software. It could be them turning off their firewall because they want to access something. It could also be one of the IoT devices inside their home network. That could lead to a breach as well. So, in order to prepare for the challenges that come about, it's very easy to tell people that they should secure their network, secure their devices. But in reality, there's a few measures that can generally be taken in order for this to happen. So the first few are preventive measures, such as application whitelisting. So what you have in your devices, you make sure that unauthorized software is not being installed into the devices. If someone needs another application to be installed, they can always go through IT department to get the permissions that they need. Patch applications is also a very important one, where let's say you have Windows vulnerabilities that exist, but because your employees work from home, some of them don't even turn off their laptops for all you know, and the Windows might not get updated. They might have Flash still installed inside and things like that. So a lot of applications don't get patched as they need to be. Configuration management and security policies are more towards servers, for example, or especially if you run certain applications that require admin access. So to give you an example, there are laptops that are issued that are given full admin access towards how the device is managed. And people with a bit of know-how and a bit of Googling, they can usually circumvent things such as installing unauthorized softwares, installing a VPN to torrent, and things like that. So after the preventive measures, the next steps is usually towards the protective measures that protect the data and the flow of data within your organization. In protective measures, we have a few things that I can bring forward to you. One is access controls and 2FA. So for departments, example, people in finance, they don't have to know about HR's data for that matter. People in operations don't have to know about don't need access to financial information. So this is what we call access control, making sure that only the right people have access to the right data instead of giving them a blanket of everything. 2FA is something that's been talked about all the time. And to be honest, a lot of people don't practice it as they should. But it is a very strong protective measure that we've seen time and time again to at least mitigate a lot of the risk that comes about. Timely patch management goes in line with patching our applications. If there is a critical vulnerability, example for Log4j, which I think has set the whole internet on fire for the past 1 month, knowing that you have a vulnerable machine and patching it as fast as you can is crucial and essential to reduce or mitigate the risk that comes about with such critical vulnerabilities. And lastly, to restrict admin privileges to the endpoints. So how does all of this happen? You have so many measures, preventive, protective, to go about. And it all starts with understanding the ecosystem that you have. And what I mean by ecosystem is all your endpoints, whether managed, unmanaged, work from home, or inside the office itself. So in order to fill the visibility gaps that you might have in your organization that will leave them vulnerable, you have to ask yourself a few questions, whether you can confidently answer yes to any of this. First being the cybersecurity posture. How much insights do you have in your own IT environment right now? If in your company you have 50 employees, do you know that all 50 of them are using company-issued assets? Are any of them using unmanaged assets? Are they installing things that they shouldn't? Let's say I want to have PDF sign on my Adobe Reader, but it doesn't come with the free version. I could download a crack. It takes me 10 minutes. Have they been installing things like that? Second is cyber hygiene standards. For all the softwares that are installed, are they in line with your security policies? Are your operating systems, are there softwares, are applications, are they all patched accordingly, kept up to the latest versions as the vendors release these patches? Then with that, if you can answer yes to these two, the third one would be data accuracy. Do you have an accurate snapshot of this data, even if it's coming to you? Do you know what your employees are using on your computer? Do you know whether they are patching, they are updating? purposely uninstalled anything just for the sake of it, such as your antivirus software. And lastly, compliance. Do you have enough control with this data to minimize compliance risks that comes along with it? Especially those of you who manage sensitive customer data with PDPC and the PDPA guidelines. Do you have enough control and data to minimize the risk that if a breach does occur eventually, or if there's a heightened, if the employee misplaces something by accident, has the data been adequately secured? So, with that, knowing your assets is the first step of taking back control and understanding the whole ecosystem of your environment. And it starts with asset discovery. So in asset discovery, these are some of the steps that OneSecure has recommended to our customers time and time again. Yeah. In asset discovery, you have to have the correct tools to scan, identify all the assets that are in your environment, in your network, or accessing your data. And with that, it should be able to push out a report, easy to understand report, so that the IT departments, when they look at it, they know how to make it into actionable insights. If you find that there's 2 or 3 devices that are unmanaged, you do not know what they are in your environment, then your IT department should be equipped with the necessary skills to try and find out what's happening, or at least find the end user and ask them what's this and what's happening on them. Once you have a report and you understand the assets that are in your environment, comes vulnerability scanning. And when I talk about vulnerability scanning, it's not in the form of penetration testing or VAPT for that matter. It's more of checking whether any of your software, have they been patched properly? Have they been updated? Are your OS up to date, or at least to the latest security patch that provides you as minimal risk as possible? And once you have a clear picture of that, once you know your assets, you know what software inside, what software is being installed, what's happening inside the end users and the endpoints, you can actually start to do more in-depth value assignments to them. So the laptop of, let's say, the CEO is a higher value than someone of operations for that matter, especially if your access controls are there. So you assign value, you see which endpoint has more weightage, which endpoint, if they get breached, has the potential to leak the most data out. Secondly, is the threat context. If you have, bringing back to the Log4j example, if you know in your ecosystem you do not use the Log4j library for that matter, then the threat context doesn't apply or doesn't apply directly. But however, if you have web applications, servers that you run that vulnerable version, for example, then the threat context changes completely. You know now that you have an increased risk of potential of breach and exploitation. And from there, you can gauge your exposure. How open is this network? How open is your server? Or how much access does the CEO laptop have for that matter? Does he have unfiltered access to all the data in your company? If he gets breached by a ransomware, for example, does that mean that all your company data runs the risk of being locked by the ransomware? And having the first 3 steps of data brings you to asset remediation, which is risk management. Now that you have a clear picture of what your assets are, what's inside your assets, and you have given a proper weightage to all your assets, what risk management can you discuss with your IT department, with your stakeholders, with your management for that matter, and then ask them, can we remediate, can we patch it? If not, can we mitigate it? Is there a way to lessen that risk if a patch is not available? And if these two still don't apply, then is it acceptable to just accept the risk and hope as you wait for a better solution to come about. And once you're done with asset remediation, you do asset assessment. Once you've patched it or accepted the risk or found mitigation steps for your endpoints, you have to always reassess what's happening in your ecosystem. It can be every week, it can be every month. Generally, what we apply to our customers is that at least twice a month, reassess even at a high level just to see whether these vulnerabilities or these risks, have they gotten higher? Is there been a better solution that you can do to lower this risk? And from there, you can see underlying issues and see the matrix of what's happening here, especially for things where you accept the risk. If you're accepting the risk, does it make sense? Does it make sense for you to maybe take the endpoint offline instead, find a better solution, or revisit it at a different time? And this becomes a continuous cycle over and over again. At a certain interval, you have to go back to discover your assets again. You have to go back and understand what's happening in the ecosystem again, because what's happening now versus what's happening in 3 months' time can be a very big difference. So to give you a very quick high-level idea of how all of this ties in together, I will be using a case study that where a research institute was hit by the Ryuk ransomware, I think somewhere in May of this year. So what happened was this student, he wanted access to a data analytical software that was very expensive. So instead of paying for the license, he downloaded a pirated software. In downloading the pirated software, it actually came with some sort of malware where it tracked his credentials. And because this student had to access a central network in order to access the research data, his credentials was abused on this remote network. And just because of one small mistake, in a span of between 1 month from downloading the pirated software, what happened was the ransomware was downloaded as a payload onto the servers and encrypted. Thankfully, the research institute had backups, so they did not pay the ransom in the end, but I think they lost quite a fair bit, maybe 2-3 weeks of research data, which is invaluable for a research institution. So when we look at a case study like this, what you can do is that if they had proper security policies or an application whitelisting, the pirated software would not even appear to begin with. It could be blocking torrent traffic. It could be preventing unauthorized software from being installed. Secondly is configuration management. Even though his credentials were abused, if there was 2FA, it would not have, probably would not have reached the network in such severity. And lastly is access control. If the data that he is accessing was controlled in a way that he could only see what he needed to instead of seeing everything on the server, then maybe that mitigation might have helped a bit as well. But as this is all speculative. So what OneSecure employs for understanding the ecosystem is we have a service known as Tenium as a service, where it's a platform that allows our customers and ourselves and our security team to ask any questions for the endpoints at a rapid pace. For example, if I use back the log4j, I can use a simple search string where it understands natural language and says, how many endpoints have the log4j library installed? And with that, it will generate a report for me very rapidly within a few minutes. Whereas IT teams might take a few days, even a few weeks for some of them to find out, Tenium will help you do it in a couple of minutes, under an hour. And with that data that comes in, that knowledge, you're able to act on it very rapidly. Once you know what's happening, you can go straight into risk assessment. Can you patch it? Can you remediate it? Or can you accept it? And so the advantages of Tenium is that, one, it gives you full visibility into the network. Two, it enhances your cyber hygiene. Straight away, you will know who has disabled the firewall, who has disabled the antivirus for whatever reason. Three is threat detection. If there is a new IOC, it allows you to search your whole ecosystem at one point, saying that, let's say there is a new Flag Pro malware. As long as you know the hash, you can put it into Tenium. Tenium will find all the endpoints at one time instead of doing concurrent virus scanning or asking your end users to scan for the viruses. And lastly is cyber response. If you do find a malware, there are controls for it to validate, contain, and eradicate the threat as it comes in. And all this is done on one platform and only one agent on the client. So this is what we call a true unified endpoint security management. And it can be done on cloud, server, containers, Windows, or Mac OS. Basically, anything that can put a lightweight agent onto it. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.